You may think it is harmless when a man looks at you too deeply, when his silence unnerves you, when his words seem to cut into your secret thoughts. But beware, such men are not merely clever, nor are they simply intuitive. They are in communion with the unconscious, and that makes them dangerous. For when a man has awakened spiritual intelligence, he becomes a mirror of your hidden self. He sees not only the face you show the world, but also the shadow you hide from yourself. I must tell you, when you stand before such a man, you are no longer shielded by your persona. Your mask is torn away, and he looks directly into the archetypal currents of your soul. He knows your demons not because you confess them, but because they live in him as well, and he has dared to descend into their depths. That descent has given him sight. This is why the presence of such a man unsettles you. You feel exposed, as though your dreams were spoken aloud. He carries in his glance the weight of 1,000 myths, and in his silence the judgment of your unlived life. If you are unconscious of your shadow, he will awaken it in you, and you may resent him for it. If you flee from your anima, he will call it forth in you, and you may love him against your will. But do not be deceived, his knowledge is not gentle. To stand near such a man is to be forced into confrontation with your own depths. He can liberate you, or he can destroy your illusions. That is why I call these signs dangerous. They are not the tricks of a charmer, but the marks of one who has wrestled with archetypes and survived. Listen carefully. I will show you 6 signs by which you may recognize such a man. Guard your heart if you are not ready for the truth, for he does not merely meet you, he unmasks you. And once you are unmasked, you can never again return to ignorance. Introduction. I have often observed that what men call spiritual is seldom spiritual at all. It is usually a disguised hunger for power or admiration, an unacknowledged craving to be extraordinary. True spiritual intelligence, however, has nothing to do with moral superiority or outward brilliance. It is the gravity of one who has seen the depths and can never again live lightly upon the surface of things. When a man awakens to the life of the spirit, something ancient stirs within him. He no longer moves merely through external events, but through symbols, through presences that live behind the veil of appearances. His eyes grow heavy with vision, for they have looked upon the secret pattern of his own soul. To stand before such a man is to feel that invisible worlds are near, breathing through his silence. Women especially feel this gravity, often without knowing why. Their instincts perceive what reason cannot name. They sense that such a man is not merely a person, but a portal. He becomes an archetype in flesh, and in his presence the soul of the woman remembers its own forgotten depth. She feels both drawn and unsettled, for his energy touches the eternal within her. I have seen this many times. When a woman stands before a man who has truly descended into his own darkness, her anima trembles. She recognizes that he carries within him the very mystery she has sought in dreams, the union of light and shadow. Yet she also feels the danger of such proximity, for the unconscious in her begins to awaken, and no awakening occurs without upheaval. The world confuses cleverness with depth. Many men learn to imitate understanding. They speak of ideas they have never suffered, of symbols they have never met in the blood. But spiritual intelligence is not the product of clever reasoning. It is born of confrontation with the shadow, of wrestling with despair, until meaning emerges like gold from the furnace of chaos. I learned long ago that the unconscious does not yield its secrets to the curious, but to the courageous. The ego fears dissolution. It defends its boundaries as a frightened child, clings to its mother's skirt. Yet wholeness demands that we allow the boundaries to dissolve, that we descend into what terrifies us and return bearing insight. That descent marks the difference between a man who plays with mysteries and a man who has become a mystery himself. To perceive the invisible, one must first endure invisibility. The man of spiritual depth withdraws not out of contempt for the world, but because the noise of men drowns the voice of the self. He must listen where others shout and wait where others strive. His solitude becomes an instrument of perception, for in the stillness the archetypes begin to speak. But I must warn you, not every silent man has found the self. Some wear quietness as a mask to conceal emptiness. Charisma without consciousness is a counterfeit of spirit. How many false prophets charm the soul only to enslave it? They mimic revelation, yet speak only the language of desire. To discern the true from the false is the first test of the awakened feminine soul. True spiritual intelligence is communion with the archetypal field. It is not an act of will, but of surrender to the psyche's deeper law. The man who attains it becomes transparent. his life ceases to be personal in the ordinary sense. Through him, forces older than civilization move again: the wisdom of the serpent, the tenderness of the divine child, the fire of transformation that burns away illusion. To the uninitiated, such a man seems dangerous because he is not bound by the same illusions. His presence calls forth what is unintegrated in others. The woman who has hidden her longing, her anger, or her divinity will find them suddenly alive in his company. He does not do this by intent. It happens because he lives in accord with the unconscious, and the unconscious in others responds to its own voice. This is the law of reflection. What you perceive in another is what seeks recognition in yourself. When you meet a man of spiritual intelligence, you do not merely encounter him, you meet your own depths. His sight penetrates because he sees through the archetypal lens, and that lens is shared by all humanity. Thus, when he looks upon you, you feel exposed, not to him, but to yourself. Many women mistake this mirroring for love, for it awakens an ancient memory of the soul's union. Yet if you idolize such a man, you destroy both him and yourself. The projection of divinity is intoxicating. It blinds you to your own divine image. When you kneel before him, you are kneeling before what is already within you. He becomes the sacrificial vessel for your own unlived light. I have seen the tragedy of such projections. The man, overwhelmed by being made God, becomes inflated and falls into ruin. The woman, betrayed by her own illusion, retreats into bitterness. Both suffer because neither understood that the sacred encounter was meant for mutual transformation, not worship. Every authentic meeting of souls demands the withdrawal of projections and the acceptance of responsibility for what has been seen. In the end, the man of spiritual intelligence is but a signpost pointing toward the inner world. To fear him is to fear your own depths. To adore him is to refuse them. The only correct attitude is reverence without submission, openness without surrender of the self. For what he awakens is not his power over you, but your power within you. The path of spiritual intelligence is perilous. It begins with suffering, moves through solitude, and ends in integration. One cannot learn it from books or from the admiration of others. It must be lived, digested, and paid for with the coin of one's illusions. Only then does the soul begin to speak in its true voice, the voice that does not explain but reveals. Such men are not saints. They are wounds that have learned to see. They are bridges between the seen and the unseen, between the rational and the mythic. To approach them is to feel the border tremble, for in their gaze the world becomes symbolic again. The tree, the river, the silence of night all regain their forgotten holiness. He lives not above the world but through it, perceiving God even in its imperfections. This then is the mirror of the unconscious. It reflects truth without adornment. To stand before it is to know oneself beyond pretense. And if the reflection frightens you, remember that fear is the guardian of transformation. The mirror does not wound, it reveals the wound already there. The man who holds it merely invites you to look. Beware, therefore, not of him, but of your refusal to see. For he who resists the image in the mirror condemns himself to live among shadows. But she who dares to gaze steadily into it will find that the darkness contains a light older than the stars, a light that does not blind but illumines the depths of being. Siganai, he dwells in the borderland between worlds. There are men who do not fully belong to the daylight of ordinary life, nor entirely to the shadows of the night. They move between worlds, carrying fragments of both. Their gaze seems distant, not because they are absent, but because they are listening to another order of reality, whispering behind appearances. Theirs is a double citizenship, one in the visible realm of men, the other in the invisible kingdom of symbols. Such a man perceives meaning where others see coincidence. A dream, a gesture, the flight of a bird, these are not accidents to him, but communications from the depths. He has learned to read the script, written by the unconscious upon the surface of the world. For him, life does not proceed by chance, but by pattern. He walks the path of synchronicity, guided not by logic, but by the mysterious accord between inner and outer events. His consciousness does not cling to fixed distinctions. He does not divide spirit from matter, or heaven from earth, but sees the one pulsing through the other. What to the intellect appear as opposites, to him are complementary halves of a single whole. The sacred is hidden in the profane, the eternal glimmers through the transient. He does not speak of this as doctrine, but as direct experience, for he has witnessed the veiled part in his own soul. When I first encountered such men, I felt the atmosphere around them charged with a peculiar density, as if the air carried invisible meanings. One could not speak with them long without feeling the ordinary flow of thought disturbed, widened into deeper channels. They seemed to converse as though listening to something larger than the words themselves. Each pause bore significance, each silence an echo of the infinite. The modern mind, addicted to clarity, finds such people disquieting. It wants definition, not mystery; explanation, not participation. Yet the spiritually intelligent man lives precisely in that twilight where explanation fails. He endures ambiguity without despair because he knows that life itself is paradox. Where others demand certainties, he sees the creative tension of opposites, the dance of light and darkness that sustains existence. Dreams accompany him as nightly companions. He does not dismiss them as fantasy, but recognizes them as messages from the deep strata of the psyche. He has learned that the dream is the speech of the unconscious, and that every symbol arising from it is a living being in the theater of the soul. To forget one's dreams is to neglect the very script of one's life. He, therefore, listens. Intuitions also guide him. He follows subtle currents of feeling and image that others ignore. To those imprisoned in rationalism, this seems folly. Yet it is through intuition that the soul reveals its direction. Intuition is the organ of the spirit, as the eye is of the body. The man who has developed it walks as if illumined from within, moving toward meanings he cannot yet define but inwardly knows to be true. Such a man's solitude is not retreat but ritual. He withdraws not from men but from their noise, to keep alive his dialogue with the unseen. In solitude, he tends the inner flame that civilization has almost extinguished. He listens for the faint pulse of the archetypes, for the voice of the self that speaks only in quietness. This solitude is creative, not barren. It is the womb in which the new consciousness gestates. To stand near him is to feel the pull of another order of reality. Women sense it first. Their intuition perceives the current of energy that radiates from him. It unsettles them because it does not seek possession but awakening. He is not interested in conquest but in revelation. His presence reminds them of their own forgotten communion with the invisible, and that remembrance both attracts and frightens. He carries the tension of opposites within his soul. Heaven and earth, eros and spirit, reason and mystery wrestle in him like Jacob with the angel. He is torn between longing for unity and fidelity to division. Yet it is precisely this tension that generates his depth. A man without inner conflict is a man without growth. The spiritually intelligent man lives at the border because only there can the opposites fertilize one another. I once said that the gods have become diseases. In men such as this, they begin to heal. For he does not repress the divine energies of the unconscious. He gives them form and voice. He paints, dreams, prays, or contemplates, and through these acts the gods of old are reborn as living symbols within him. Thus he reconciles the ancient and the modern, allowing the forgotten sacred to speak again in a language of today. His speech is often double-edged. To the inattentive ear, he speaks plainly, but those attuned to symbol hear another meaning beneath his words. He does not invent this depth. It arises spontaneously from the strata of his being. His language participates in myth. It is poetry born of experience. When he speaks, one feels that the word itself breathes a living entity that bridges the inner and outer worlds. This dual existence isolates him. The world demands conformity, but he has seen too much to obey its illusions. His path is lonely, for few can accompany one who lives in two realities. Yet his solitude is filled with invisible companions, the images of his dreams, the whisper of ancestral voices, the unseen guidance of the self. He is never truly alone, for he walks in the company of symbols. Women who encounter him feel both danger and deliverance. His perception pierces the veil of persona and sees the archetypal woman behind the social mask. This sight can liberate or terrify. To be seen in one's archetypal nakedness is to stand before eternity itself. Some flee, others awaken. It depends on whether they are prepared to meet their own depth reflected in his. The danger of such a man lies not in malice but in magnitude. His consciousness touches the collective unconscious, and that contact stirs forces beyond personal control. When you draw near him, these forces begin to move in you as well. Forgotten memories, dreams, and desires surface. Repressed emotions seek expression. You may attribute this upheaval to him, but it is your own soul responding to the call of its twin. Many cannot bear this mirror. They mistake their own awakening for his manipulation and flee. Yet the man of spiritual intelligence does not ensnare. He reveals. He becomes the instrument through which your unconscious announces itself. If you misunderstand this, you may hate him, though he has done nothing but be himself. Such men are rare because few endure the initiatory loneliness their path requires. Most retreat to the comfort of collective values, to the safety of reason or dogma, but he who chooses to live at the threshold must bear the vertigo of uncertainty. He must walk without ground beneath his feet, trusting the invisible as one trusts a bridge seen only in dream. He has tasted despair and learned that meaning often hides in the very abyss that threatens to devour it. Therefore, he does not fear darkness. He enters it as one enters a temple. For in the blackness, he finds the raw material of transformation, the prima materia of the soul. He knows that consciousness grows not by fleeing chaos, but by engaging it with devotion. To meet such a man is to glimpse the borderland of the human spirit. He will not lead you by persuasion, but by presence. His being radiates a quiet authority born of communion with the invisible. In his company, you sense that ordinary life is a thin membrane stretched over infinite depth. He reminds you that the seen and the unseen interpenetrate, and that every gesture has symbolic consequence. If you are sensitive, his very silence will teach you. He may say little, yet his gaze speaks volumes. You feel the archetypes stir beneath your daily life, the mother, the lover, the wise child, each reawakened by his awareness. He seems to carry the entire psychic inheritance of mankind within him, and when he looks at you, you feel the weight of that history pressed gently upon your soul. He stands as mediator between the timeless and the temporal. Through him, the psyche of humanity continues its dialogue with the world. Such a man does not belong to himself. He belongs to the task of consciousness. The gods speak through his intuition, and the earth answers through his suffering. Between them, he walks as a bridge of flesh and spirit. Yet remember, he is still human. The borderland is perilous. Many who enter it lose balance and sink into madness or inflation. But he who endures the tension without surrender becomes a vessel of meaning. He learns to live the paradox, to be both limited and infinite, wounded and whole, creature and creator. If you should ever love such a man, do not attempt to possess him. He cannot be owned, for his allegiance is not to personality, but to the inner world. Love him as one loves a sacred fire, by standing near enough to feel its warmth, but not so near as to be consumed. For his task is not to comfort, but to kindle transformation in all who approach. Sign 2. He has confronted his shadow and bears its mark. Every true awakening begins with descent. Before the light of consciousness can rise, it must penetrate the darkness of the unconscious. The man of spiritual intelligence has not reached his stature through purity or avoidance, but through confrontation. He has faced the most unworthy, shameful, and destructive forces within himself and has not fled. He carries the memory of that descent like a scar upon the soul, a mark invisible to most, but felt by all who draw near him. When I speak of the shadow, I do not mean merely the moral failures we conceal. I mean that vast region of unlived life that each of us banishes to the dark. It is composed of all we refuse to be our fears, envies, desires, and forgotten capacities. The spiritually awakened man has not banished his shadow. He has made its acquaintance. He has listened to its voice until he could distinguish its truth from its poison. This knowledge gives his presence weight, for he no longer speaks from innocence, but from integration. The man who has confronted his own evil no longer preaches morality. He knows how fragile virtue is, how easily it masks ambition or pride. He does not condemn, because he understands that sin and holiness are intertwined like roots beneath the soil. He has met the tempter within himself, and has learned that the devil is not a myth, but a psychological reality, the power that binds man to unconsciousness. To wrestle with that power without being devoured by it is the beginning of wisdom. His calmness unsettles you because it was not cheaply bought. It is the stillness that comes after storms, the quiet earned through suffering. Within him, rage and tenderness dwell side by side, reconciled by experience. He does not tremble before the passions of others, for he has known his own. This gives him a strange authority. He understands without judgment, and therefore his understanding penetrates. When you look into his eyes, you sense that he has seen something irrevocable. He has peered into the abyss and recognized his likeness staring back. Few endure that vision. Most flee into distraction or moral superiority. But he remained long enough to see that the darkness also contained the seeds of light. That discovery changed him forever. He no longer speaks of good and evil as absolutes, but as polarities within the process of becoming whole. There is a humor in him, subtle, melancholic, often misunderstood. It springs from the knowledge that man's seriousness hides absurdity. He laughs not at others, but at the tragic comedy of his own pretensions. This laughter is not cynical, it is redemptive. It releases the tension of opposites and allows life to flow again. Only one who has been broken by his own folly can laugh in such a way. The danger of such a man lies in the mirror he offers. When you come near him, your own shadow begins to stir. You feel emotions you thought buried, envy, anger, forbidden longing. He awakens in you what you have denied. This is not manipulation, but contagion. The unconscious of one person calls forth the unconscious of another. If you are not prepared, you may accuse him of the very impulses that arise within yourself. Many friendships and loves have shattered on this invisible law. He is not interested in appearing pure. Purity, as the ego imagines it, is sterile and one-sided. He has learned that wholeness, not perfection, is the aim of the soul. The dirt of the earth must cling to the roots if the tree is to bear fruit. Thus he does not hide his flaws behind pious gestures. He may even seem irreverent or rebellious, yet beneath that exterior lives a profound reverence for truth, for authenticity, for the mystery that encompasses both saint and sinner. His moral authority does not derive from obedience to rules, but from obedience to experience. He has earned the right to speak because he has suffered the consequences of his own nature. When he warns, it is not as a preacher, but as one who has been burned. He knows that every attempt to suppress evil only drives it deeper, where it works in secret. Instead, he brings it to consciousness, exposes it to light, and thus robs it of its destructive power. To stand in his presence is to feel the coexistence of opposites. You sense both danger and safety, compassion and severity. His eyes can be as gentle as a saint's and as piercing as a judge's. This duality confuses those who live by appearances, for they expect consistency from men. But he has accepted contradiction as the very texture of existence. Having reconciled it within himself, he embodies paradox, a sinner who blesses, a wounded healer, a man redeemed through imperfection. I have often said that the shadow is 90% pure gold. What is repressed is not only evil, but vitality, creativity, and passion. The man who has confronted his shadow has reclaimed these powers. He does not moralize against desire, he channels it toward creation. He does not suppress aggression, he transmutes it into courage. In this way, he transforms the base metals of instinct into the gold of consciousness, an alchemical process mirrored in every genuine transformation of the soul. The shadow also guards the mystery of love. Only one who has faced his inner hatred can love without illusion. For love that denies its opposite becomes sentimentality. Love that includes it becomes compassion. The spiritually intelligent man loves not because he is good, but because he has discovered within himself the totality of human nature. He knows that each person carries both the murderer and the saint, and this knowledge deepens his tenderness rather than diminishes it. Many are drawn to such men because they radiate reality. Their presence liberates others from pretense. One feels allowed to be human again, to err, to feel, to desire, to grieve. He does not demand perfection, he invites truth. But this liberation has its danger. Those unready for self-knowledge may interpret his acceptance as permission to indulge their lower nature. Yet the man himself never confuses consciousness with indulgence. To integrate the shadow is not to act it out, but to recognize it and hold it within awareness. I once dreamed of descending into a dark cave where I met a serpent coiled around a hidden treasure. The serpent threatened to strike, but I knew that the treasure could not be taken without enduring its gaze. So I sat beside it until its hostility dissolved and it revealed the gold beneath its coils. This dream taught me that the instinctual forces within us guard the very riches we seek. The man who has confronted his shadow has sat with his serpent and emerged enriched rather than poisoned. You will know such a man by the atmosphere he carries. It is not bright but luminous, not soft but substantial. His presence is like the air after a storm, cleansed yet heavy with memory of thunder. There is a depth to his silence that words cannot touch. You sense that he could destroy illusions with a sentence, yet he refrains, for he has learned the cost of premature revelation. Women, in particular, feel the gravity of this man's darkness. They sense that he could see into them as easily as into himself. This evokes both fascination and fear, for his gaze does not flatter, it reveals. If she has denied her own shadow, she will experience his as threat. But if she has begun her own descent, she will recognize him as a fellow traveler, a man who has passed through night and returned with light in his hands. To love such a man is to love danger itself, for his intimacy demands the death of illusion. He will not protect you from yourself. He will hold the mirror until you face what you have avoided. Yet in that moment of terror lies the possibility of rebirth. For when two souls meet in their shadows, the archetype of transformation is invoked. They cease to play roles and become participants in the sacred drama of individuation. He does not seek disciples or followers. He has seen how easily the shadow corrupts power. Instead, he points each person back to their own depths. His gift is not doctrine, but example, the living proof that wholeness is possible. He stands as reminder that no light endures unless it has passed through darkness. No wisdom matures without the fire of conflict. I have often written that every man carries within him the image of God and the image of the devil, and that salvation depends on their reconciliation. The man of spiritual intelligence has achieved a fragile truce between these powers. He walks as a man possessed by both heaven and hell, neither enslaved nor indifferent. The divine and the demonic are no longer enemies within him, but dialectical partners in creation. Do not expect serenity from him in the sentimental sense. His peace is forged, not given. It vibrates with the memory of chaos. To sit beside him is to feel the tension of existence itself, life striving against death, meaning struggling with absurdity. He bears this tension not as burden but as destiny, knowing that the evolution of consciousness requires it. Thus, when you meet such a man, do not ask what creed he follows. His faith is older than religion and wider than dogma. It is the faith of one who has descended into his own hell and discovered there the seeds of paradise. He no longer prays for rescue, he prays for courage to continue the work. And through that prayer, he becomes the instrument of a wisdom that transcends both virtue and vice. To love him is to love the part of yourself you most fear. He will awaken it, not by intention, but by presence. If you can endure that awakening, you will find within it the path to your own wholeness. For the mark he bears is not merely personal. It is not merely personal. Is the universal wound of mankind, the rift between consciousness and instinct. To behold that wound without turning away is the beginning of transformation. Sign 3. He speaks the language of symbols. The man of true spiritual intelligence does not think in abstractions, he dreams in images. His mind does not dissect, it beholds. Where others seek to explain, he seeks to see. Every gesture, every accident, every meeting bears meaning for him, for he has learned that the world speaks in signs, and that symbols are its native tongue. His thought is not argument, but revelation, drawn from the living depths of the unconscious. Such a man listens as one listens to sacred music. When you speak, he hears not only your words, but the myth behind them. Your hesitation, your sigh, the flicker in your eyes, these are for him the alphabet of the soul. He perceives the archetypal drama concealed within your daily story, the lover's quarrel as the dance of anima and animus, your despair as the dark night of transformation, your dream as the scripture of your unconscious. He reads the book of your being as a mystic reads the stars. The symbol is not a mere sign or allegory. It is a living bridge between consciousness and the unconscious. It joins what logic divides. A symbol is born when the psyche cannot express itself by reason alone. It bursts forth in image, paradox, and mystery. This man has learned to live by these revelations. He no longer dismisses a dream as illusion or a coincidence as chance. He knows that the soul, when it wishes to speak, chooses disguise. To understand him, you must abandon the modern prejudice that the symbol is primitive. It is not primitive, it is primordial. It carries within it the collective experience of mankind. To him, the myth of Orpheus is not a fable, but an interior event, the descent of consciousness into the depths of the unconscious, the peril of turning back before love is redeemed, the death and resurrection of Osiris, the crucifixion of Christ, the labors of Hercules. All are reflections of psychic realities that unfold within every human being. In his presence, conversation becomes initiation. He does not discuss, he evokes. His words seem simple, but as they sink into you, they awaken images and emotions you cannot explain. Long after he has fallen silent, his sentences continue to work within you like seeds. You will dream of him or of something he said, not because of personal fascination, but because your own unconscious has been stirred into life. He does not impose meaning, he reveals its existence. When he speaks of love, he does not mean sentiment but the union of opposites. When he speaks of suffering, he means the crucible of transformation. His speech is alchemical. It transforms emotion into insight. You may feel as though he touches some ancient part of you that remembers everything, the temples, the rituals, the songs of forgotten ages. Such men are rare, because few have endured the long discipline of learning to hear the unconscious without distortion. It requires purity of attention, humility before mystery, and the courage to live without final answers. He has been misunderstood by the rational, condemned by the dogmatic, and ridiculed by the ignorant. Yet he persists, for he knows that to silence the symbolic voice is to kill the soul. His mind moves like a dream. Images rise unbidden and connect themselves by invisible threads. He perceives analogies where others see division. A falling leaf, a broken mirror, a child's laughter, all become mirrors of cosmic truth. He lives in a perpetual dialogue with meaning, and this dialogue grants his life a strange coherence. Events that seem unrelated form constellations in his awareness. He walks through the labyrinth of existence as through a temple inscribed with hieroglyphs, deciphering the mystery step by step. Those who live only by logic find him unsettling. They accuse him of vagueness or mysticism because he refuses to reduce life to formula. Yet, what they call vagueness is the richness of ambiguity, and what they call mysticism is fidelity to experience. He knows that the psyche is not a mechanism but a mystery, and that its truth cannot be trapped in the net of reason. He dreams not to escape reality but to comprehend it. In dream, he meets the gods in their true form, not as metaphors but as living powers. The wise old man, the shadow, the divine child, the anima. These are not inventions of his fantasy but manifestations of the collective unconscious. Through their appearances, he learns the language of the soul. When he tells you of a dream, he does not interpret it like a riddle. He lets it unfold as one would open the petals of a flower. His imagination is sacred. He does not treat fantasy as idle play, but as a psychological organ. Just as the eye perceives light, imagination perceives meaning. Through it, he communes with what transcends him. He can look upon a painting, a poem, or a stone and feel the same reverence others reserve for the altar. For him, every created form is an expression of the one life-seeking consciousness. There is danger in his speech. Symbols once awakened do not obey the ego's command. They stir emotions older than civilization. They can flood the conscious mind with images too vast to contain. To speak with such a man is to risk possession by one's own unconscious. Many who listened to prophets and poets through history mistook this inner disturbance for seduction or madness. But it is the cost of contact with the numinous, the touch of the divine fire that purifies and burns. He himself knows this peril. He has wrestled with inflation, the temptation to identify with the symbols that move through him. He has learned that to speak for the unconscious is not to be the unconscious. He remains servant, not master, of the inner voice. Thus his humility deepens even as his insight expands. The one who has truly seen into the depths does not exalt himself. He trembles before the mystery he serves. When he looks upon the world, he does not see chaos, but a vast tapestry of correspondences. He senses that the same pattern shaping a rose petal moves also in the stars. This perception does not make him proud, but reverent. He feels the unity of creation and knows that every soul, every object, every event participates in the cosmic drama of becoming. To him, life is not a series of episodes, but a myth enacted by eternity. In his company, the ordinary reveals its radiance. A cup of water, the crack in a wall, the shadow of a tree, each becomes a symbol, a revelation of the divine in matter. He lives in what the ancients called mundus imaginalis, the imaginal world that lies between spirit and sense. There he converses with the archetypes, not as abstractions, but as presences. And when he returns to ordinary life, he brings back traces of that radiance in his words and gestures. To listen to him is to feel oneself drawn inward. He awakens in you the same symbolic perception. You begin to notice your own dreams, the coincidences that guide you, the meanings hidden in your daily encounters. It is as if he lends you his eyes until you remember your own. This is his true teaching, not to enslave you to his vision, but to awaken yours. Sometimes when he speaks, you will sense an echo from your childhood, when the world was still alive with mystery. He restores to you the sense that everything is speaking the wind, the animals, the silence between words. You feel again that existence is not mechanical but enchanted. This enchantment is not illusion but participation, the recognition that consciousness and cosmos are one. He moves easily among myths because he knows they are not lies but psychological truths dressed in story. He may cite ancient legends or dreams from his patients, yet behind them all he seeks the same pattern: the emergence of consciousness from darkness, of self from chaos. Myth, for him, is the history of the soul told in eternal form. Such a man cannot remain untouched by beauty. For him, beauty is not aesthetic pleasure but revelation. It is the radiance of the archetype breaking through matter. He sees beauty in sorrow, meaning in decay, life in death. The rose that fades teaches him as much as the one that blooms. His aesthetic sense is a moral faculty, for it recognizes value where others see none. You may feel that he lives in another dimension, but he is more real than those who call themselves practical. His vision gives substance to existence. To meet him is to feel that your life too is part of a larger design. He does not promise you answers. He reminds you that meaning is found not by solving, but by living the symbol that presents itself. He reads his own destiny symbolically. When misfortune strikes, he asks, what God is moving here? When joy visits, he asks, what does this image demand of me? He thus turns every experience into dialogue with the self. Through this continual interpretation, his life becomes a work of art shaped by invisible hands. Beware of mistaking his insight for clairvoyance. He does not predict, he perceives. The future reveals itself to him only as potential, as the next unfolding of the pattern. His foresight is not magic, but sensitivity. Because he listens to the unconscious, he senses what wishes to be born before it appears. He stands at the edge of creation, where thought becomes event. In his silence, you feel stories forming. He seems to carry within him the memory of all mankind. You realize that he speaks not only for himself, but for the collective unconscious. The myths of every age converge in him, finding new expression through his words. He is the mouthpiece of what is timeless in humanity, the eternal storyteller who translates the language of gods into the speech of men. When he departs, you feel as if you have awoken from a long dream that has altered your sight. The world seems richer, denser with meaning. You understand that the symbolic perception he embodies is not his alone. It is the birthright of every soul. But to claim it, one must learn to hear the voice of the unconscious, to honor the dream, to live as participant in the great myth of being. Such is the gift and danger of the man who speaks the language of symbols. His words can illuminate or unhinge, heal or unsettle. They strip away the trivial to reveal the archetypal core of life. To listen to him is to stand before the mystery of existence itself and recognize, perhaps for the first time, that you too are a symbol written by the hand of eternity. Sing for he awakens the anima in others. Every woman knows, though seldom consciously, that within her sleeps a figure who longs to awaken a secret masculine presence, who carries the key to her inner temple. Yet only a few men possess the power to awaken this figure rightly. The spiritually intelligent man does so not by charm or desire, but by resonance. His soul vibrates in harmony with the archetype of the anima within him, and through this resonance he touches the same principle in others. When a woman encounters such a man, she feels both seen and summoned. It is as though he speaks a language she once knew but forgot. His glance penetrates beneath appearances, beyond adornment, directly into the soul's hidden sanctuary. He does not praise her beauty or flatter her virtues. He calls forth her reality. Before him, the woman senses that she cannot remain superficial. Something within her insists on depth, on authenticity, on truth. I have said that the encounter between man and woman is always more than personal. It is the meeting of two psychic worlds, of two cosmic principles seeking union. The man who has reconciled his anima within himself carries a living image of the feminine. This grants him a perception of woman that transcends possession or admiration. He sees in her the embodiment of divine nature, of eros, intuition, and soul. Thus, when he gazes upon her, she feels herself recognized not as an object, but as mystery. But this recognition is dangerous, for when the anima in a woman awakens, it does not merely bring tenderness or inspiration, it releases the storm of her unconscious. Dreams intensify, emotions deepen, forgotten longings rise. She may believe that the man himself is the source of these feelings, but he is only the mirror in which her own depths are reflected. The awakening is hers, though she may mistake it for his power. This misunderstanding is ancient. From time immemorial, woman has projected divinity upon man, as man has done upon woman. The danger lies in confusing the archetype with the person. When a woman falls under the spell of an awakened man, she may believe she loves him, but in truth she loves her own emerging soul mirrored through him. To grasp this distinction is to preserve freedom. To ignore it is to fall into bondage. The spiritually intelligent man is aware of this projection. He knows that his task is not to accept adoration, but to endure it without inflation. He must carry the weight of the divine image placed upon him without identifying with it. For if he does, both he and the woman will be destroyed, he by pride, she by disillusionment. It is a dangerous grace to awaken the anima in another while keeping one's own ego humble. His empathy differs from sentimentality. It is not born of pity, but of recognition. He has met within himself the eternal feminine, the aspect of soul that mediates between consciousness and the divine. Through her, he has learned to feel with the heart, to intuit without reason, to love without possession. This inner union gives him a subtle understanding of women that no theory can teach. His presence invites them to descend into themselves, to rediscover the source of their own wisdom. In his company, a woman often feels expanded. Her imagination blooms, her words find new rhythm, her intuition sharpens. She begins to perceive life symbolically as he does, and senses herself part of a greater mystery. What she experiences is not seduction, but participation in the archetypal dance of the masculine and feminine. The energy that flows between them is sacred, eros, the force that unites opposites, not the hunger that consumes them. Yet there is peril here, for this sacred fire can burn as easily as it illumines. If the woman is unprepared to integrate what awakens, she may become possessed by the image of the man. Her inner world fills with fantasies. Her life revolves around his presence, and she mistakes obsession for love. This is the tragedy of the unassimilated projection, the soul's demand for union expressed through the narrow gate of personal attachment. The wise man does not exploit this vulnerability. He knows that to claim her devotion would be to rob her of her own individuation. Instead, he holds the mirror steady, allowing her to see herself. He remains near enough to guide, but distant enough to preserve her freedom. His restraint is not coldness but compassion, for he knows that every soul must ultimately unite with its own inner counterpart, not with another's. When she withdraws the projection, the relationship changes. The man ceases to be an idol and becomes a companion in the work of consciousness. The woman begins to see that what she loved in him is the reflection of her own latent divinity. Her longing turns inward, toward the self, and the erotic tension that once bound her becomes a bridge to spiritual integration. Through him, she has encountered her own soul. I have often compared this process to the ancient alchemical conjunctio, the union of sun and moon, sulfur and mercury. It is a sacred marriage, not of bodies but of principles. In the crucible of relationship, the opposites within each participant begin to mingle. The man becomes more receptive, the woman more decisive. He discovers feeling, she discovers strength. Each moves toward wholeness through the reflection of the other, but few endure this alchemical fire. The heat of transformation exposes impurities. Many retreat, preferring the familiar discomfort of halfness to the terrifying wholeness of the self. The man who awakens the anima in others must therefore accept solitude as his companion, for though many are drawn to his light, few can withstand its illumination. He is often misunderstood. Some accuse him of seduction, others of cold detachment. They do not see that his influence arises not from intent, but from being. His soul has become a vessel through which the archetype of the reconciled masculine speaks. Those who touch this energy will feel it as love, though it transcends all personal boundaries. The presence of such a man restores the balance between eros and logos in the world. Where the masculine intellect has dominated, he brings feeling. Where emotion has ruled, he brings clarity. His being is harmony in motion, and those around him begin to resonate with it. Women especially find in him the forgotten image of wholeness, the masculine that honors the feminine, the strength that protects rather than suppresses, the reason that listens to intuition. But he too must guard against the temptation to play savior. The psyche delights in masquerading as the divine. If he begins to believe himself healer of souls, the very light that guided him will become darkness. The anima he has integrated will turn against him, and his wisdom will rot into manipulation. Therefore, the truly awakened man remains vigilant, confessing daily his humanity before the mystery that moves through him. The woman who dares to stay near such a man without surrendering her individuality will find herself transformed. The mirror he offers is not of flattery but of revelation. In him, she meets her own power, her own darkness, her own divine image. This meeting may begin with enchantment but ends with autonomy. She emerges not as disciple, but as equal a being who has tasted the sacred within herself. In myth, such encounters are symbolized by Persephone's descent into the underworld or Psyche's trials for love. The man plays the role of Hades or Eros, not as oppressor, but as initiator. He leads the woman into her depths, where she confronts her own shadow and reclaims her soul. If she endures, she returns to the upper world crowned with consciousness. Thus the danger becomes blessing, and love becomes transformation. The awakened man's gift to the world is not domination, but invocation. Through his being, the feminine principle re-enters life. He becomes a bridge through which the repressed qualities of intuition, receptivity, and soul find expression in both sexes. In this way, he contributes not only to the individuation of those he meets, but to the healing of culture itself. For every age sickens when the feminine is denied, and every renewal begins with her return. He knows, too, that his awakening is incomplete without her. The union of masculine and feminine within the psyche is never final. It deepens endlessly. Every woman he meets reveals a new facet of the eternal feminine, a new demand for integration. Thus, he approaches each encounter not as conquest, but as initiation. In every relationship, he listens for the voice of the self speaking through the other. If you should find yourself in the orbit of such a man, do not mistake your awakening for his power. Recognize that he has only lit a torch that was already in your hand. Follow its flame inward, into the chambers of your own being. There you will find the same presence that you glimpsed in him, the living image of your soul, waiting to be embraced. For the truth is this: no man can awaken what is not already stirring within you. He can only call it by its name. When you answer, you reclaim the light and the darkness that are yours. Then you no longer need him as mirror or master, for the same intelligence that moves in him now moves in you. This is the true completion of the anima's awakening, not dependence, but self-possession, not worship, but union with the eternal within. Siegen 5. He endures loneliness without bitterness. Loneliness is the crucible in which the soul is refined. Every man who seeks true consciousness must pass through it, for solitude is the price of depth. The man of spiritual intelligence has walked this desolate path and found it sacred. He has been separated from the collective not by choice but by necessity. To perceive the unseen, one must first lose the reassurance of the visible. Most men flee loneliness as they would a plague. They fill their hours with distraction, noise, and the company of others, hoping to escape the sound of their own soul. But he who has listened to the silence knows that it speaks. Out of solitude arises the voice of the self, slow, solemn, and inexorable. The spiritually intelligent man has learned to recognize that voice and obey it, even when it commands him away from comfort into isolation. There are nights when such a man feels abandoned by the world. Friends fall away, lovers misunderstand, society calls him eccentric or lost. Yet in that very desolation, he discovers companionship of another kind. The unconscious begins to reveal itself not as emptiness but as presence. He feels the invisible company of archetypal powers, the wise old man, the great mother, the child, each guiding him through the inner wilderness. I have written that loneliness does not come from having no people about one, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important. The awakened man knows this pain well. His experiences, drawn from the depths of the psyche, cannot easily be shared. The words available to ordinary consciousness are too narrow for what he has seen. Thus, even when surrounded by others, he often remains inwardly alone. But his solitude is not sterile, it bears fruit. Over time, he discovers that the same silence that once tormented him now nourishes him. He learns to draw strength from it as from a hidden spring. In solitude, his thoughts ripen, his dreams grow articulate. He begins to sense that the entire cosmos participates in his inner life. The trees, the stars, the rain on the window, these become companions that answer him in symbolic speech. He no longer confuses loneliness with absence. He understands that to be alone is to stand in direct relation to the self, unmediated by others. The crowd disperses the soul, solitude gathers it. Through solitude, the man becomes whole. He ceases to seek validation from outside and listens instead to the rhythm of his own depths. The more he obeys this rhythm, the more authentic he becomes, until every word, gesture, and silence expresses something of the eternal. The collective will never understand him, for he no longer serves its gods. The man of spiritual intelligence lives according to an inward law. Society values usefulness, he values meaning. The world seeks success, he seeks integration. To those bound by convention, his indifference appears arrogance, his stillness passivity. Yet he has simply exchanged outer ambition for inner necessity. His solitude has burned away the need for recognition. Praise and blame no longer sway him, for he knows that truth must often walk alone. He endures misunderstanding as a tree endures the storm without complaint, without hatred. From this endurance arises a peace that is not resignation but clarity. He realizes that no one can accompany him entirely on his path, because the path leads into the innermost sanctum of the soul, where each must stand alone before the self. The mark of such a man is quiet joy, not the exuberant happiness of the crowd, but the deep contentment of one who has reconciled with his destiny. His eyes shine not with excitement, but with comprehension. He has accepted the loneliness of consciousness as the condition of freedom. To be awake is to be separate, but it is also to be connected to everything that lives. In the mythic imagination, every hero departs from home, ventures into solitude, and faces trials before returning transformed. This pattern is not metaphorical, it is psychological. The man of spiritual intelligence has lived this myth inwardly. His solitude was the forest in which he met his demons and his gods. Emerging from it, he carries the wisdom of experience, a quiet authority born of survival. Loneliness has purified his love. No longer does he love from need or fear of abandonment. Having faced emptiness and found it full of presence, he can love freely, without clinging. His affection arises from abundance, not deficiency. When he gives, it is not to fill his void, but to share his fullness. Thus, his love has the quality of grace, calm, steady, and self-contained. Many women sense this serenity and feel both comforted and disturbed by it. They find in him the stillness they have sought, yet that same stillness reminds them of their own restlessness. His love does not flatter. It sanctifies. It asks nothing but truth. To be loved by such a man is to be invited into solitude with him, not into isolation, but into communion that is vast and wordless. Yet this serenity has been dearly bought. He has known despair. He has felt the nights when the soul seems a ruin and God a void. He has cried out and heard no answer. But through these long silences, he has learned that the divine does not speak in the language of reassurance, but of transformation. Loneliness is the hand of God removing false certainties. In enduring it, he discovered faith, not belief, but trust in the unseen order of being. Some call his detachment coldness, but it is not. His heart still burns, only the flame is steady. The passions that once raged within him have been reconciled into a deeper warmth. He no longer seeks to impress or to convince. He is content simply to be. His peace may seem inaccessible, but it is offered to all who dare to live without illusion. He knows that solitude is the price of individuality. The more one becomes oneself, the less one belongs entirely to others. He accepts this exile willingly, for it allows him to serve the truth rather than opinion. His loneliness becomes vocation, the place where he listens to humanity's collective dream and translates it into consciousness. Through him, the unconscious of mankind finds voice. Such a man often becomes a guide, though he never sought disciples. Those who meet him feel the authenticity of his silence. They come to him not for answers, but for presence. In his stillness, they encounter themselves. He does not heal by method, but by being. His solitude has made him a mirror, and those who look into it glimpse their own potential wholeness. The danger that surrounds him is subtle. His freedom may provoke envy in others. Those still chained to approval and distraction cannot forgive the one who has escaped. They will call him arrogant or aloof, not realizing that he has merely ceased to play their game. But he bears their projections without bitterness. Having reconciled his own shadow, he knows that accusation often conceals admiration unacknowledged. His solitude also protects him from the intoxication of collective emotion. He does not lose himself in mass enthusiasm or despair. When nations rage or crowds exult, he stands apart, observing the archetypal forces at play. This detachment is not indifference, but clarity. It allows him to discern the hidden patterns moving beneath history. He becomes, in his own quiet way, a custodian of consciousness. To sit in his company is to feel a peculiar stillness, as though the world itself paused to listen. One senses that his mind is vast and unhurried, that he draws strength from invisible roots. He may say little, yet his silence communicates a wisdom older than speech. His loneliness has become a temple, and whoever enters it must remove the shoes of pretense. If you have ever known such a man, you will remember him not for his brilliance, but for his peace. He teaches by example that solitude need not harden the heart. His endurance proves that isolation can mature into love for all living things. He has discovered the paradox that the more one accepts separation, the more one feels unity with the whole. For loneliness, when accepted, transforms into communion. The man who endures it without bitterness discovers that behind every absence stands presence itself. He no longer prays for company, for he knows that the self is always near. This realization grants him quiet dignity, a composure that no misfortune can shatter. When you meet such a man, you will feel that he belongs nowhere and everywhere. He moves through the world as through a dream he has already understood. Nothing clings to him, for he has made peace with transience. His solitude is his homeland, and in it he carries the serenity of one who has faced the void and found it full of meaning. He endures loneliness not as punishment, but as initiation. He has discovered that the soul must stand alone to hear the whisper of eternity. The crowd cannot accompany him, nor can love protect him from this necessity. Yet from his solitude he returns, bearing gifts, insight, compassion, and the unshakable calm of one who knows that all roads, however divergent, lead at last to the same center, the self. Sign 6, he lives as an instrument of the self. There comes a moment in the life of every man who seeks truth when he realizes that he is no longer the author of his own story. The ego, which once believed itself the master of destiny, is unseated. A deeper center takes command, a power at once intimate and impersonal. The spiritually intelligent man has reached this point. He no longer lives merely according to desire or reason, but according to an inner necessity, a voice that issues from the self. This surrender is not weakness, it is obedience to the deeper law of being. The ego serves as the hand of consciousness, but the self is the unseen artist. The man who has become its instrument moves with the precision of one, guided by invisible design. He may appear aimless to others, yet everything in his life unfolds with secret order. The events that befall him, the people he meets, even the losses he endures, all serve a purpose known only to the self that directs him. Such a man does not mistake fate for fatalism. He does not drift, he consents. He collaborates with the unseen wisdom that shapes existence. Having relinquished control, he discovers freedom. He obeys the self, not as a slave obeys a master, but as a musician obeys the rhythm of a symphony. His life becomes art, composed not by intention but by participation in the eternal. He listens for the voice that speaks in symbols, dreams, and circumstance. When he hesitates, the world itself seems to conspire to guide him, a phrase overheard, a chance meeting, a sudden intuition. These are not superstitions but manifestations of synchronicity, the mysterious correspondence between inner and outer events. The man who lives as an instrument of the self moves through a world alive with meaning. His morality transcends convention. He does not measure right and wrong by social custom or religious decree, but by fidelity to the inner law. What is required of him may appear unreasonable or even scandalous to the collective mind, for he answers to another order. He is not lawless, but his law arises from within. He acts from authenticity, not conformity, from integrity, not approval. Because of this, he often stands misunderstood, accused of pride or heresy. Yet he endures without resentment, for he knows that the self is greater than personal vindication. He has ceased to argue. The truth no longer needs his defense. His task is simply to live it. Each gesture, each silence becomes expression of the same obedience, to act without attachment to outcome, to speak when moved, to be silent when the inner voice withdraws. He accepts suffering as initiation. The blows of fate are not punishment, but chisels shaping his soul. Each wound carves away another fragment of illusion, revealing the image hidden within. Pain, for him, is the sacred fire that burns the dross of ego. He does not seek it, but when it comes, he greets it as a teacher. Through such surrender, he becomes tempered like iron, resilient and radiant with meaning. I have often observed that those who serve the self radiate a quiet inevitability. Their lives seem guided by an intelligence that works through accident and error alike. They may appear to fail by worldly measure, yet their failures bear fruit unseen. Even their suffering contributes to the pattern of wholeness. They are like instruments through which the self plays the melody of transformation. He no longer strives to persuade or convert. The self does not require disciples, it requires witnesses. Thus, his mission is not to preach but to embody. His presence itself communicates what words cannot. Those who meet him sense that he carries an inner authority not derived from learning but from being. It is the authority of one who has died to himself and been reborn into the universal. Such men are often mistaken for visionaries or mystics, yet they are profoundly human. They know hunger, weariness, and doubt. But beneath these passing moods lies an unshakable faith in meaning. The self, once awakened, does not permit despair to reign unchecked. Even in confusion, a deeper current flows a trust that every descent conceals an ascent. He lives within this rhythm as within the breathing of God. To live as an instrument of the self is to abandon calculation. The ego forever asks, "What shall I gain?" The self asks only, "What is required?" This shift transforms his existence. He gives without expectation, acts without vanity, and accepts without complaint. His joy comes not from success but from participation in the great work, the unfolding of consciousness itself. He has learned the wisdom of patience. For the self moves in vast cycles. Its rhythm is slow, its purpose sure. He does not force outcomes. He trusts the ripening of events. Like the alchemist tending his vessel, he waits through long obscurity until the transformation is complete. This patience gives him serenity in the face of uncertainty. The world rushes, he abides. There is danger in such surrender, for the boundary between obedience and possession is thin. Many who hear the voice of the unconscious mistake it for divinity and fall into delusion. The truly awakened man guards against this. He tests every inspiration against conscience, every revelation against humility. He knows that the self, though divine, works through human limitation, and that to serve it well he must remain grounded in reality. Because he lives by inner necessity, his relationships take on a symbolic quality. Each person who crosses his path is recognized as messenger or mirror. He does not cling to those he loves, for he sees that each encounter serves the evolution of the soul. To hold another too tightly would be to arrest the work of the self in both. Thus, his love is spacious, allowing freedom even in intimacy. You will notice that such a man carries no pretense of perfection. He makes no display of holiness. The sacred works through him precisely because he acknowledges his humanity. His humility protects him from inflation. He may stumble, err, and even sin, but through these experiences, the self continues its mysterious labor of integration. What matters is not faultlessness, but awareness. The man who lives as instrument of the self possesses a peculiar courage, the courage to be uncertain. He no longer demands guarantees from life. He walks as one, guided by a lantern whose light reaches only a few steps ahead. Yet he trusts that what lies beyond will be revealed in its time. This faith is not blind, but experiential. Having witnessed the hidden order in his own life, he knows that the same order governs all things. He recognizes himself as part of a larger movement, the evolution of consciousness in humanity. His private joys and sorrows are threads in a tapestry whose pattern he cannot see but deeply feels. This awareness fills him with both humility and responsibility. His smallest act participates in the shaping of the collective soul. Therefore, he strives to act with integrity, knowing that what he does in secret reverberates through eternity. Those who encounter him often sense destiny in his presence. It is as though life itself bends around him, adjusting to the invisible orbit of his calling. He does not command this influence. It flows naturally from his alignment with the self. Through him, synchronicities multiply, and others find themselves awakened, drawn into their own path of individuation. The self, working through him, calls others to remembrance. To serve the self is also to know awe. The man who has surrendered to its guidance understands that he is but a vessel for forces beyond comprehension. This knowledge humbles him more than any doctrine could. He kneels inwardly before the mystery that animates him, aware that he participates in a divine experiment that God seeks to know himself through human consciousness. In this light, he perceives every experience as revelation. The trivial becomes sacred, the painful instructive, the ordinary luminous. He lives in continual dialogue with the numinous, where each day's events are hieroglyphs of the divine will. Such perception is not imagination but participation, the lived awareness that spirit and matter are two faces of one reality. Yet his devotion is not servitude. The self does not enslave, it liberates. In becoming its instrument, he becomes most himself. For the ego, when purified of self-will, becomes a clear channel through which the essence of the individual can shine. Thus, paradoxically, the more he serves the inner law, the more unique he becomes. The universal speaks most clearly through the particular that is wholly itself. When you meet such a man, you will feel an extraordinary stillness, as if the ground of being itself were near. He listens more than he speaks, and when he speaks, his words seem inevitable. You sense that they do not come from thought, but from alignment. He is not persuasive, because he does not need to persuade. Truth radiates through him as fragrance from a flower. He moves through life as through a temple. Work, love, solitude, and suffering, all are sacraments to him. He does not divide sacred from profane, for he knows that the divine pervades everything. His morality is aesthetic. He seeks beauty of soul, harmony between inner and outer. Even in grief, there is grace in him, the grace of one who has accepted his role in the cosmic drama. Many fear such men, for they mirror the possibility of surrender that every soul resists. They remind others that control is illusion, that life belongs to a higher order. But those who are ready find in his presence a strange liberation. To witness obedience to the self is to glimpse what it means to be free, free from compulsion, fear, and the tyranny of the ego. The man who lives as instrument of the self walks between worlds, human yet touched by the divine, bound by mortality yet animated by eternity. He embodies the reconciliation of opposite spirit incarnate, matter made luminous. Through him, the purpose of evolution becomes visible, that consciousness should awaken to itself in the heart of man. He will tell you, if you ask, that he does not know where his path will lead, but he walks it with quiet certainty, for he knows who leads it. His confidence is not arrogance, but faith in the ordering intelligence of the psyche. Each day he awakens and listens for instruction. Each night he returns his deeds to the silence from which they came. His life is prayer without words, the continual offering of himself to the mystery that moves through all things. And thus he becomes what every soul is destined to be, a vessel of divine awareness, a note in the eternal harmony, a conscious instrument of the self. In him, the human and the godlike meet and recognize each other. He has not conquered the world, nor escaped it. He has fulfilled it. Through his obedience, creation becomes conscious of itself. Outro, the awakening of the inner mirror. When you meet a man of such depth, you do not truly meet another, you meet yourself. In his presence, the unconscious within you begins to stir. You feel simultaneously exposed and recognized, as though the light that shines from his eyes were an ancient memory of your own. This is the final danger and the final grace of encountering spiritual intelligence. He becomes a mirror in which your own soul stands unveiled. I have seen how easily men and women mistake this revelation. They believe they have met a master, a prophet, a savior. They bow before the image of the other, not realizing that it is the self they adore. The truth is more demanding. The man who awakens your depths does not offer salvation. He demands participation. His gaze insists that you take back every projection, every divine quality you have bestowed upon him, and find its source within yourself. Most resist this command. It is easier to remain spellbound, to worship the image rather than live the truth. To withdraw the projection is to face one's own poverty. But consciousness requires precisely this humility. The task is not to remain enthralled by the mirror, but to become the one who sees. That is why such encounters are perilous. They do not end in comfort, but in transformation. If you resent him, it is because he has revealed your own shadow. If you revere him, it is because he has revealed your unlived divinity. Both emotions are misdirected, both conceal flight from responsibility. You cannot hate or adore what is truly other, only what belongs secretly to yourself. Thus, the soul uses the mirror of relationship to draw you toward integration. The spiritually intelligent man does not accept your worship. He knows that to be idolized is to be imprisoned in another's unconscious. He reflects your image only long enough for you to recognize it, and then he withdraws. This withdrawal feels cruel, but it is necessary. The self demands freedom, not dependence. Love, when transmuted, becomes awareness. You will find, after the first enchantment fades, that what remains is not the man, but the movement he awakened. Your dreams will shift, symbols once external will begin to arise within you. The mirror has turned inward. What once appeared as the wisdom of another now speaks from the depths of your own being. This is the true initiation to discover that the same light which shone through him now burns quietly in your heart. To awaken the inner mirror is to recognize yourself as both seer and seen. The self, reflected in the world, calls you to consciousness. You realize that every meeting, every attraction, every conflict is a correspondence between your inner life and the outer world. You begin to read existence symbolically, as he did. Life ceases to be a series of accidents and becomes revelation. But beware. To live without projection is to live without illusion, and few can endure such clarity. The ego thrives on drama, on the comfort of blame and adoration. To withdraw these fantasies is to stand naked before reality, a frightening simplicity that feels like loss. Yet in that emptiness, a new center forms, the awareness that observes without judgment, that loves without possession, that simply is. The man who once seemed dangerous becomes, in retrospect, your next teacher. Not because he taught, but because he reflected. His danger lay only in your resistance to seeing. Once you accept the image, the peril dissolves. What remains is gratitude not to him, but to the mysterious law of the psyche that brought him across your path at the appointed hour. In this realization, you begin to understand the nature of all relationships. Every person you meet carries a fragment of your unconscious, a forgotten quality seeking recognition. The world itself is a mirror of the soul. To walk through it consciously is to participate in the great work of individuation, the gradual emergence of the self through the myriad reflections of life. The awakening of the inner mirror transforms perception. You no longer see others as obstacles or objects of desire, but as symbols, as living emissaries of your own development. Conflict becomes dialogue, pain becomes instruction, love becomes revelation. Even those who wound you are mirrors of your own unhealed parts. The world ceases to be divided into good and evil, friend and enemy. It becomes one vast psyche, and you its awakening eye. This awareness does not lead to detachment in the cold sense. It deepens compassion. For when you see that every soul struggles with its own shadow, you cease to judge. You recognize yourself in the criminal and the saint alike. The opposites within humanity no longer repel you. They belong to the totality you have glimpsed in yourself. The mirror has become transparent, revealing the unity that underlies all forms. To awaken thus is to enter solitude of a new kind, not the loneliness of exile, but the stillness of comprehension. You begin to live from the center rather than the circumference. The need to impress, to possess, to be right falls away like dead leaves. What remains is presence, quiet, alert, compassionate. This is the natural state of the self when freed from the distortions of projection. In such moments, you realize that the man who knew your demons was not clairvoyant. He recognized them because he had reconciled his own. His vision pierced you because it was the same light that illuminates the depths of all souls. He was never reading your secrets. He was reading the collective human story written within you. And now that you see, you understand that you too carry this vision. You become the mirror for others. Without intending, you begin to awaken in them what was once awakened in you. They may misunderstand you, fear you, or idealize you, just as you once did another. Thus the cycle continues, consciousness passing from soul to soul, reflection upon reflection, until humanity itself becomes luminous with self-knowledge. This is how the self expands, not by conquest or persuasion, but by recognition. Each time one soul awakens, the collective unconscious grows a little more conscious of itself. Through the eyes of the awakened, the universe beholds its own image. The dangerous man, the one who knew your demons, was an emissary of this divine work. He was the instrument through which the self sought to awaken in you. Do not cling to the form he took. Forms are temporary vessels of eternal meaning. The face that once dazzled you will fade, as all symbols must, but the reality it pointed to will remain. That reality is the living presence within you, the center that watches, loves, and endures beyond the flux of appearances. To identify with that center is to be reborn. When you withdraw your projections, the soul regains its power. You are no longer divided between worship and resentment, ideal and despair. You stand whole, reconciled with the light and the darkness that constitute you. The energy once bound in fantasy becomes available for creation, for love, for conscious life. The world around you responds in kind, for the outer always mirrors the inner. This is the ultimate purpose of every encounter with spiritual intelligence, to draw you back to yourself. The man who knew your demons has fulfilled his role when you no longer need him. His danger becomes your strength. His insight becomes your own. You realize that the entire drama was orchestrated by the self to bring you to this point of awakening. From here, the path continues inward. You begin to live as he did, attentive to dreams, obedient to intuition, anchored in solitude. You become participant in the same mystery that once bewildered you. The mirror now faces both ways. You see the divine in others, and you see yourself in the divine. The distinction between subject and object, observer and observed, dissolves into unity. At this stage, many experience profound peace. The struggle for validation ends. The world, with all its contradictions, is embraced as the body of the self. Yet this peace is not final. The process of individuation has no conclusion. It deepens infinitely. Each realization opens a new horizon. The self is a living mystery, and its revelation in human consciousness is the endless work of time. To live with such awareness is to dwell in reverence. Every meeting, every separation, every joy and sorrow becomes sacred. You move through existence with the gravity of one who knows that nothing is trivial. Each act participates in the eternal dialogue between God and man, between consciousness and the abyss. This understanding imbues even the smallest gesture with meaning. When you look once more upon the man who awakened you, you will see him differently, no longer as teacher or threat, but as brother on the same path. You will perceive the same struggle in his eyes, the same humility before the mystery. For in truth, he was never above you, only ahead by a few steps on the road that leads inward. The difference between you now has vanished, as all differences do in the light of the self. At last you understand, the dangerous man was never dangerous in himself. The danger was your own unconscious, the shadow you had not yet dared to meet. He merely held the mirror steady until you could look. And once you have looked, you can never again live in ignorance. For what is seen cannot be unseen, what is integrated cannot be lost. Consciousness, once born, endures. This is the true liberation, not escape from darkness, but recognition of its light. To know your demons is to redeem them. To see through illusion is to become real. You no longer seek saviors or explanations. The world itself becomes your teacher, the self your guide, and your own soul, the temple where God reveals his image. I have often said, he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. Now you have looked inside. You have seen that the one you feared and the one you adored were both reflections of your own totality. The mirror has merged with the gaze. The knower and the known are one. And so I leave you with this final truth. There is no other. Every danger, every love, every revelation was the self in disguise, calling you home. The man who knew your demons was but its messenger. Now the message is within you. Live it. For the work of awakening never ends. Each soul must become the mirror through which the world beholds its own divinity. Only then will the darkness of mankind be transformed not by doctrine or miracle, but by countless eyes remembering what they are. And when at last you can look upon another and see not stranger or threat, but the same eternal presence that looks through you, then the mirror will have completed its work. The dangerous man will vanish into symbol, and in his place will stand your own reflection, whole, awake, and at peace.